The night shift at St. Alden's had ended in the kind of silence that follows exhaustion. The corridors were empty except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the squeak of Elena Ward's sneakers against the waxed floor. She'd spent 12 hours tending to the sick and dying, yet all she wanted now was coffee strong enough to burn away the memory of beeping monitors. Outside, dawn was only a pale suggestion behind a blanket of fog. The hospital's glass doors hissed open, releasing her into the cold air. She tugged her coat tighter, her badge swinging against her chest. For a moment, she simply stood there, breathing in the sharp scent of antiseptic mixed with rain. Then she saw him. A man, frail, hunched, wrapped in an oversized coat, was standing at the curb, watching the entrance. His eyes followed every doctor, every nurse, until they landed on her. The instant they did, he froze. His lips parted, and something broke across his face, a tremor that became a sob. Are you Michael's daughter?" he choked. Elena blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" The man stumbled toward her, his knees giving way before he reached the steps. Instinct took over. She dropped her bag and knelt beside him. His hands were shaking violently, blue veins raised beneath paper-thin skin. She caught the scent of hospital disinfectant on him, faint but familiar. "Sir, stay still," she said, checking his pulse. "We'll get you back inside." He grabbed her wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. "You have his eyes," he whispered. "God help me. It's like seeing him again." Her heart skipped. "Who?" "Michael," he said. "Michael Vance." The name struck like a wrong note. She had never met anyone by that name. Her father, David Ward, had died when she was 16. He was an accountant, not someone who left strangers crying on hospital sidewalks. Before she could ask more, the man's head lolled sideways. A nurse rushing out for a smoke spotted them and shouted for help. Within seconds, they had him on a gurney, rolling through the automatic doors. Elena followed without thinking, the word Michael still echoing in her mind. As they wheeled him past the reception desk, the man's eyes fluttered open once more. He looked straight at her and whispered, barely audible, "Tell your father." "I'm sorry." The monitors beeped steadily as the doors closed behind him, swallowing the sound of his breath. Elena stood frozen in the corridor, her reflection pale in the glass. Somewhere deep inside, a truth she didn't yet understand had begun to stir. Elena couldn't shake the sound of his voice. "Tell your father." "I'm sorry." Those words echoed through her shift the next evening, threading through every call light and heart monitor. She had seen countless patients slip in and out of consciousness, but no one had ever wept at the sight of her. By morning, curiosity outweighed fear. She found his name in the patient registry. Arthur Hale, 72, admitted for cardiac distress, medical alert bracelet marked dementia, moderate. The diagnosis made sense. His confusion, his trembling. But that didn't explain the name he'd spoken. Michael Vance. After her rounds, Elena stood outside his room, watching him sleep beneath a thin hospital blanket. His face, in repose, looked carved from worry itself. Faded scars traced his jawline. One hand twitched restlessly even in sleep, as if gripping a phantom gun. She hesitated, then stepped inside. "Mr. Hale." His eyelids fluttered. "Where am I?" "St. Alden's," she said gently. "You collapsed outside yesterday. I'm the nurse who helped you." He blinked at her for a long time. Then, slowly, his eyes filled again. "I thought I was seeing a ghost." Elena forced a nervous smile. "You said something strange to me yesterday. You called me Michael's daughter. My father's name was David Ward." The air between them thickened. Arthur looked past her toward the window, where morning light fractured through rain streaks. "That's what she told you, isn't it?" "She." "My mother." He nodded faintly. "Ruth Ward. Quiet woman. Always looked over her shoulder." Her pulse jumped. "You knew her." "I knew them both," he whispered. "David Ward and Michael Vance. But they weren't two men, Miss Ward. They were one and the same." Elena stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "That's impossible." Arthur's voice trembled with age and guilt. He changed his name after the operation went wrong. Witness protection of a sort. I tried to find him for years, but the department buried the case. Michael Vance, your father, was one of ours. A detective. And one of the best. Until the money went missing. She took a step back, the fluorescent light suddenly too bright. You're mistaken, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. I wish I were. His gaze sharpened for a moment, clarity breaking through fog. Your father wasn't the man you think he was. He was the man we could never arrest. The heart monitor pulsed in steady rhythm, counting her disbelief. Elena wanted to argue, to demand proof, but Arthur's strength drained away. His eyes fluttered shut again, sinking back into confusion. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving streaks of silver on the glass. Elena pressed her trembling hand against the cold pane. Her reflection stared back, a face suddenly unfamiliar, carrying the shadow of a name she'd never known. Somewhere beneath the noise of the ward, a memory began to stir, her mother's voice, whispering late at night, "Don't ask about your father." And now, she finally understood why. Elena didn't sleep that night. Arthur Hale's words replayed in her head until dawn, twisting through her thoughts like smoke she couldn't clear. Your father wasn't David. He was Michael Vance, the man we could never arrest. By morning, the truth had become an itch beneath her skin. Every childhood memory felt suddenly counterfeit. The bedtime stories, the laughter, the photo albums lined neatly on the living room shelf. Each smile her father wore in those pictures now looked forced, every family pose rehearsed. When she arrived at her mother's old house, the air smelled of lavender and dust. The curtains were still drawn, the way Ruth always kept them after moving into the assisted living home last year. Elena hadn't been back since. Now, every creak of the wooden floor seemed to whisper things she wasn't ready to hear. She started in the living room, flipping through photo albums, hoping to find something ordinary to anchor her thoughts. Her father, David, fishing by the lake. Christmas morning. Her 8th birthday, cake candles reflected in his glasses. Every image told the same lie. Nothing of Michael Vance. Nothing of a detective. But memory has a cruel way of guiding desperate hands. When she reached for the framed family portrait above the fireplace, the frame tilted loose. A faint crack spidered along its corner. She lifted it down carefully, feeling the backing shift beneath her fingers. Something was hidden there, wedged between the photo and the wall itself. Her pulse quickened. Using a butter knife from the mantel drawer, she pried the frame open. Behind the paper backing lay a smaller, faded photograph, edges brittle and yellowed. The air left her lungs. In the photo, her father stood beside a man unmistakably younger but eerily familiar. The same deep-set eyes, the same sharp jaw. Arthur Hale. Both men wore police uniforms. The badge on her father's chest read Vance, M. Not Ward, D. They were smiling, two partners immortalized in friendship and sunlight. Elena's fingers trembled as she turned the photograph over. On the back, written in neat, slanted handwriting, was a date, June 5, 1989. 3 years before she was born. Below it, a short line. For the ones we couldn't save. MV. The world seemed to tilt. Her mind raced through everything she'd ever known. Her father's sudden transfer to another city, the late-night phone calls, the times he flinched when a car slowed near their house. Even the day he died, a closed-casket funeral after a car accident, no one was allowed to view. Her chest tightened. The attic ladder creaked above her, half pulled down. She climbed, driven by something between dread and need. The attic smelled of insulation and forgotten years. Boxes labeled Ruth sewing, old bills, Dee's toys. But one box sat alone in the corner, unmarked, sealed with old tape. Inside, wrapped in newspaper, lay a worn leather badge holder. The metal inside was dulled by time but unmistakable. Detective Michael Vance, Internal Affairs Division. Elena sank to the floor. Dust danced in the thin beam of morning light cutting through the attic window, turning the air into something almost holy. Her father had been a detective. Her entire life had been built on a false name. And somewhere in those lies, she realized, her mother was still keeping watch, guarding a truth she could no longer ignore. Elena drove to the care home with the photograph burning a hole in her bag. All the way there, the image replayed in her mind, her father smiling beside Arthur Hale, the name Vance stitched across his chest. The more she tried to make sense of it, the less it resembled memory and the more it felt like betrayal. Ruth Ward was sitting by the window when Elena arrived, her thin hands folded neatly on her lap, her hair pinned with the same silver clip she'd worn for years. The television murmured softly in the corner, some daytime talk show about secrets and lies. Irony so thick it almost made Elena laugh. "Mom," she said quietly. Ruth turned, her face lighting briefly before dimming again at the sight of her daughter's expression. "You look tired, sweetheart. Work keeping you busy." Elena ignored the small talk and laid the photo on her mother's blanket. "Who is he?" Ruth's eyes flicked to the picture and froze. A tremor rippled through her fingers. "Where did you get that?" "In the house. Behind the fireplace frame. You hid it there." Her mother's jaw tightened. "That picture means nothing. You shouldn't have gone digging." "Nothing." Elena's voice cracked. "That's Dad. And that's the man who collapsed outside my hospital. He called me Michael's daughter, Mom. Michael Vance. Why did he say that name?" Ruth looked away, her chest rising and falling too quickly. "He's confused. Old men remember ghosts, that's all." "Ghosts don't forge police badges," Elena shot back. "I found it. His badge. It had Detective Michael Vance written on it." For a long moment, only the television filled the silence. Two strangers arguing about broken trust. Then Ruth spoke, her voice small but sharp. "You don't understand the world your father lived in. And you don't want to. Try me." Ruth shook her head, her eyes glistening. "David Ward was your father. That's all that matters. Let the dead stay buried." Elena stepped closer, her tone trembling. "Tell me the truth, Mom. Please." Her mother's voice rose unexpectedly, cutting through the quiet. "Stop digging into the past, Elena. You'll only hurt yourself." The outburst hung in the air, shocking them both. Ruth's hands were shaking. She turned away, staring out the window, her reflection pale in the glass. Elena's anger faltered into heartbreak. "You're protecting him," she whispered. "Even now." Ruth said nothing. That night, Elena lay awake in the guest room of the old house, unable to silence her thoughts. The floorboards creaked softly under her mother's footsteps. Then, through the thin wall, she heard it, the faint sound of her mother's sobs. And beneath those broken breaths, one name repeated over and over, fragile as a prayer. "Michael. Michael. Michael." Elena pressed a pillow against her chest, her own tears catching in her throat. The truth was coming apart at the seams, and her mother's silence was the thread holding it all together. The morning after her mother's outburst, Elena woke to the sound of knocking. For a heartbeat, she thought it was Ruth, ready to talk. But when she opened the door, a tall man in a dark coat stood on the porch, a police badge glinting in his hand. "Miss Ward?" he asked. His voice carried that clipped authority that came from years of giving orders no one questioned. "I'm Detective Nathan Hale." The name hit her like a cold splash. Hale, the same as Arthur. He seemed to notice her hesitation. "Arthur Hale is my father," he said quietly. "I was told you visited him." Elena nodded. "He recognized me. He said something about my father. About Michael Vance." Nathan's jaw flexed. "Yeah, that sounds like him." He hesitated, then added, "He's getting worse. Some days he doesn't know me at all, but he's been muttering that name for weeks. Vance. Said it over and over like a prayer." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small metal lockbox, battered and cold from the November air. A yellowed label on the lid read, in neat block letters, "Vance case, sealed." "He kept this in his office for decades," Nathan said. "Wouldn't let anyone near it. Last night, he told me to give it to the girl who looks like Michael." "That's you, I guess." Elena took the box carefully, her hands trembling. "What's inside?" "I don't know," Nathan admitted. "He never said. But whatever it is, it ruined him. The case, ended his career." They sat at the kitchen table, the silence broken only by the faint ticking of the old wall clock. Elena fetched a small screwdriver and pried the rusted lock open. The lid creaked, releasing the faint smell of dust and old paper. Inside lay a stack of files tied with twine, the edges singed as if someone had tried to destroy them. The first folder bore the same heading: Vance, Michael, Internal Investigation. Beneath it, another: Ward, David, Missing Informant Report. Her throat tightened as she unfolded the papers. Photos slipped free, grainy shots of men in suits exchanging envelopes in dim alleyways. One face, even blurred, she recognized immediately: her father's. But there were two versions of him, one labeled Detective Michael Vance, another listed as David Ward, informant, status, deceased. She stared at the page until the words blurred. The realization came like a blade. David Ward wasn't her father's alias. He was someone else, the man her father had let die. "Jesus," Nathan muttered, scanning the report. "Your father was undercover. But if he took the informant's identity after the man vanished?" Elena whispered, "Then he buried the truth and lived someone else's life." Nathan looked up at her, sympathy fighting with suspicion. "My father always said some cases don't close. They just rot." Elena closed the box, her pulse thundering. The weight of her father's sins sat heavy in her lap. Somewhere beneath those ashes, she sensed, was only the beginning. The clock in the kitchen ticked louder than usual, as though it too could feel the weight of what lay on the table between them: the box, the files, the truth. Nathan had poured himself a coffee but hadn't touched it. He sat across from Elena, arms folded, his detective's eyes scanning the pages again and again like he expected them to rearrange into something kinder. "Michael Vance," he said finally, tapping the name with one finger. "Decorated officer. Commendations, citations, even a medal for bravery. But 5 years after this photo was taken, he was under investigation by Internal Affairs." Elena lifted her gaze. "For what?" Nathan hesitated. "Money laundering. The department suspected he was funneling confiscated drug cash back into the streets, buying silence, covering tracks. His partner, David Ward, was set to testify against him." The words hit like a slap. His partner. The same name she'd thought belonged to her father. "And then?" she asked quietly. "Ward disappeared," Nathan said. "Presumed dead. His body was never found, just a burned-out car near the docks. Officially, Vance resigned 2 months later. Unofficially," he sighed, "he vanished too." Elena leaned back, the room spinning. "So my mother must have known," Nathan finished. "She changed your names. Probably ran with him when things turned bad. It wasn't safe to keep Vance. Too many enemies. Too many questions." Her chest tightened. The memories came in fragments now. The way her father had stared out the window on stormy nights, the suitcases that stayed half-packed in the closet, her mother's jump every time the phone rang. Back then, she'd thought it was stress. Normal family tension. But now, each recollection glowed like evidence under a blacklight. "He faked his death," she whispered. "Didn't he?" Nathan met her eyes. "That's what it looks like." Elena rose from the table, pacing. "My whole life, I grieved someone who never died." She pressed her palms against her temples. "He lied to both of us. To me. To her." Nathan said nothing. The silence stretched, heavy with sympathy and restraint. Finally he spoke. "Maybe it wasn't just lies, Elena. The report says Vance turned informant near the end, gave up names from inside the department. If that's true, he was caught between 2 deaths, the cartels and the cops. Faking his own might have been the only way to save you both." Elena froze, her throat tightening around a mix of rage and pity. Love and deceit, the same thread. Outside, thunder rolled across the gray afternoon. For a fleeting second, she could almost hear her father's voice again, low and certain, the way he used to say, "Everything I do for you." She turned back to Nathan, eyes steady now. "Then I need to know where he went after that. If he's alive." Nathan looked down at the old evidence box, the words "Vance case," sealed, glinting faintly under the kitchen light. Then we'll have to open more than files, he said. We'll have to open graves. The storm hadn't stopped for 2 days. It followed them like a warning, black clouds and restless thunder shadowing every mile toward the old precinct. The building stood at the edge of town, abandoned since the new headquarters opened, its windows boarded, its sign half fallen. Yet Nathan knew the way by heart. Records division's in the basement, he said, cutting the engine. They sealed it up years ago after a flood, but my clearance might still work. Elena followed him through the cracked glass doors, the beam of her flashlight slicing through dust and peeling paint. The air smelled like mildew and old paper, a tomb for forgotten sins. Each step echoed too loudly, like the building itself remembered what they were about to disturb. They reached a rusted door marked Archives. Evidence hold. Nathan tried his badge. To Elena's surprise, the lock clicked open. Still ghosts in the system, he muttered. Inside, shelves stretched endlessly, filled with boxes marked by case numbers and fading names. She ran her fingers over them. Burke, H. Mendez, R. Until one caught her breath. Vance, M. Internal Affairs. The box was smaller than she expected, as if trying to hide its weight. Nathan set it on the table and opened it carefully. Inside were cassette tapes, brittle with age, labeled in smudged ink. Interview 1, Interview 2, Final Confession. Elena hesitated. Should we? Nathan was already pulling out a recorder. If we've come this far, we listen. He pressed play. Static filled the air, followed by the low hum of a fan. Then a voice. Deep, steady, tired, her father's. Detective Michael Vance. Internal Investigation. Recording date, September 3, 1992. Elena's breath caught. It was him, the rhythm, the pauses, the quiet control he'd always had when speaking to her. But beneath it, something else. Guilt. They think I took the money. Maybe I did. But what choice did I have? They had Ruth. They had my little girl. You'd sell your soul too, if it meant seeing them alive the next day. Nathan's eyes flicked toward her. Elena gripped the table edge, her knuckles white. The cartel wanted protection. I gave them information, not everything, just enough to buy time. Internal Affairs doesn't understand. This wasn't about greed. It was survival. If I didn't play their game, my family would be in the ground. The tape clicked, then hissed. Faintly, beneath the hum, came another sound, soft and innocent. A laugh. Elena froze. She knew that laugh. Daddy, look, a tiny voice said faintly, like an echo through water. She covered her mouth. It was her, no older than 3. Nathan stopped the tape, but the silence that followed was louder than thunder. Elena whispered, he recorded that from home, during an interrogation. He wasn't confessing to them, he was leaving a message. Nathan nodded grimly. A warning, maybe. Or a goodbye. Elena stared at the recorder, her reflection trembling in its plastic shell. For the first time, she saw her father not as a hero or a criminal, but as something in between, a man drowning, dragging his morality down with him. When Nathan packed the tapes back into the box, Elena's gaze lingered on the label. Final Confession. Copy. If there's a copy, she said softly, there has to be an original. Nathan looked up. Then we find it. Outside, thunder cracked, and for a moment, it sounded almost like applause. The rain returned the next morning, soft but relentless, tracing nervous lines down the windshield as Elena drove. The address had come from a brittle page tucked inside Arthur Hale's old case notes, a final scribble in fading ink. Redwood Lane, check utilities under M. Ward. She had almost ignored it. Almost. But when Nathan cross-checked the record and found active bills registered just weeks ago, silence had no place left to hide. Now she turned off the main road and onto a narrow lane swallowed by trees. Branches leaned low, dripping water, the world shrinking into gray mist. The house appeared suddenly through the fog, small, shingled, and half swallowed by ivy, its windows dim but intact. Nathan killed the engine. You sure about this? No, she admitted, pushing open her door. But I have to see. The air was cold enough to sting. Mud sucked at her shoes as she stepped onto the path. The mailbox sagged at an angle, rusted but still used. Inside were envelopes, electric bill, medical supply order, and one more, the name printed clearly in neat, black letters. Michael Ward. Elena's heart stumbled. The paper was dry, delivered less than 2 days ago. She glanced back at Nathan, who had drawn his gun more out of habit than threat. "Someone's living here," he murmured. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "Someone who still checks the mail." They approached the porch. The wooden boards groaned under their weight. Rain pattered on the tin roof above them, steady as a heartbeat. She tried the door, unlocked. Inside, the air was warmer, touched by the faint smell of antiseptic and coffee. A kettle sat cold on the stove. A jacket hung by the door. And on the table, a half-finished crossword, the pen still uncapped beside it. Her pulse roared in her ears. Every surface seemed to breathe with memory, the kind that clung to walls and refused to fade. Nathan whispered, "Elena, we should." "Wait," she said. Her eyes had landed on a photo near the window. Her mother, younger, smiling, her father's arm draped around her shoulders. The same face she'd buried, now staring back through time. A floorboard creaked behind her. Elena spun. In the doorway at the end of the hall stood a man, tall, gray at the temples, the years etched deep into his face. His eyes met hers, filled with disbelief and something far older than guilt. He said her name softly, like he'd practiced it in silence for years. "Elena." She couldn't move. Every second stretched thin between recognition and denial. The wind rattled the window, scattering rain across the floor like shattered glass. "Dad," she whispered. His expression broke, a flicker of relief, sorrow, and something like forgiveness. Then the lights flickered out. The light stuttered once, twice, then glowed again, dim, yellow, uncertain. Nathan was already moving down the hallway, gun drawn, but Elena's feet refused to follow. The man before her didn't flinch, didn't run. He simply stood there, one hand raised in quiet surrender, the other gripping the wall for balance. "Put the gun down," Elena said softly. Nathan hesitated, eyes darting between them. "Elena." "It's him," she whispered. "It's my father." Michael Vance, or David Ward, the name he had stolen, stepped into the light. The years had hollowed him, carving lines where pride once lived. His hair had gone silver, his face drawn with a kind of exhaustion that no sleep could cure. But his eyes, sharp, haunted, painfully familiar, made time collapse between them. "Elena," he said again, voice cracking. "You look just like your mother." She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but her throat ached with everything she couldn't say. "You died," she managed. "You left us." He nodded once. "I had to." Nathan's jaw tightened. "You want to explain why?" Michael's gaze shifted to him. "You're Arthur's boy, aren't you?" "Detective Nathan Hale," Nathan confirmed, lowering the gun slightly. Michael exhaled, the sound almost a laugh. "Arthur tried to save me. He thought I could make things right." He looked back at Elena. "But the truth doesn't save people. It only changes who they blame." "Then tell me," she said, stepping closer. "Tell me why you let us think you were dead." He sank into a chair, the weight of decades bowing his shoulders. "I was working undercover. The cartel had infiltrated the department. Half the people I trusted were on their payroll. David Ward, my partner, wasn't one of them. He was clean. Too clean." He rubbed his temples, trembling. "When they found out we were investigating them, they came after us. They took Ruth and you. You were just a baby. I had one choice: give them something they could use or lose everything." "So you gave them Ward," Nathan said quietly. Michael's silence was answer enough. Elena's breath hitched. "You let him die." Tears welled in his eyes. "He was supposed to get away. I told him to run, but they were faster. I heard the gunshots before I could reach him. When the fire started, I realized I could end it there. If the world thought Michael Vance was dead, Maybe the cartel would stop looking. He looked up at her, voice breaking. I didn't die that night, but everything I loved did. Elena's tears came slow, hot, unstoppable. All this time, she whispered. You were alive while we buried you. Michael reached for her hand but stopped short, as if unworthy of touch. I watched you grow up from shadows. Every birthday, every photo in the paper. I kept you safe by staying gone. Safe, she said, her voice trembling. You left me in a lie. He nodded, tears falling freely now. And I've lived with it every day since. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky again. Low, heavy, unending, like the sound of judgment itself. 3 days later, the rain finally stopped, leaving the city washed clean but heavy with silence. The world felt quieter, slower, as if holding its breath. Elena sat on the edge of her hospital bed, not as a nurse this time, but as a visitor. Arthur Hale's name was written on the door in fading black letters. Inside, the old detective looked smaller than she remembered, his body fragile beneath a thin blanket. Machines murmured softly around him, tracing the rhythm of a life almost spent. Nathan stood near the foot of the bed, his jaw tight, his badge gleaming against the pale light. Arthur stirred when Elena took his hand. You found him, he rasped, voice thin as paper. I did, she whispered. You were right. His eyes, dim but steady, held hers. Then you know why I couldn't arrest him. Some men, they break the law to keep it from breaking others. She wanted to ask if that justified everything. The lies, the disappearances, the blood. But before she could speak, his fingers twitched once more in hers, then went still. The steady beep of the monitor flatlined into silence. Nathan turned it off himself. Later, at the precinct, he handed her a small envelope sealed in brittle wax. He left this for you, he said quietly. Said it was to be given only if, well. Elena opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single note written in uneven script. Forgive him. He saved lives when none of us could. Arthur. The words bled into her mind, rewriting everything she thought she knew about guilt and mercy. She folded the paper carefully, as if it were fragile enough to shatter, and slipped it into her coat pocket. Nathan broke the silence first. You know what you have to do, Elena. Your father's still wanted. You could clear this up. Tell the truth. Turn him in. She met his gaze. You mean betray him. I mean finish what he started. That night, she drove alone through the wet streets, the sound of the engine a heartbeat against the dark. The road to Redwood Lane felt endless, a tunnel of trees whispering secrets in the cold air. When she reached the turn, smoke drifted above the hill like a ghost. The house was gone, reduced to black timber and the faint hiss of dying embers. She stepped out of the car, the smell of burnt wood and rain filling her lungs. Among the ashes, something glinted, her father's badge, warped by heat. She knelt beside it, tears mixing with soot. Michael Vance had vanished again, leaving only ruin and a question that Mercy could not answer. By morning, Redwood Lane was a cordoned wasteland. Smoke still curled from the ruin, ghostly and persistent. Yellow tape fluttered in the damp wind while investigators moved through the wreckage, their voices clipped and routine. Elena stood behind the barricade, arms wrapped around herself, eyes fixed on what had once been her father's refuge, and her last chance for truth. Nathan arrived an hour later, coat collar turned up against the cold. Fire chief says it started near the generator, he said quietly. Probably a short circuit. She nodded, though she barely heard him. They found anything? Not much. Some metal fragments, personal effects, and what might be human remains. His pause was deliberate. But nothing they can identify yet. Elena's gaze swept over the blackened timbers, the warped frame of the front door. Everything about it felt too deliberate, too clean. The porch had collapsed inward, but the mailbox still stood, untouched by flame. She walked toward it despite Nathan's protest. Inside was a single envelope, dry and unburned. Her name was written on it in familiar, precise handwriting. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a folded document, a bank deed transferring ownership of a small property outside the city. Attached was a note, scrawled in black ink that bled at the edges. "For the life I stole from you." Her vision blurred. The investigators' voices faded into a distant hum. She looked again toward the ruins. There were no melted fingerprints on the doorknob, no trace of DNA on the glass shards. Even the remains looked too conveniently placed, like evidence arranged for closure, not discovery. "He did it again," she murmured. Nathan frowned. "What?" "He staged it. The fake death, the remains, all of it. He wanted me to stop looking, to let him disappear." Nathan exhaled, rubbing a hand across his face. "Elena, you can't know that." "I do," she said softly. He wiped himself away, the same way he did before. Only this time, it wasn't to protect us from danger. It was to protect me from him. The wind picked up, scattering ash across her shoes. She crouched, pressing her palm into the soot. It was still warm. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Nathan said quietly, "You could still report it. Close the case." Elena shook her head. "There's nothing left to close. Just a story that's burned itself out." When she finally turned to leave, the smoke trailed behind her like a shadow that refused to lift. Somewhere, she imagined, her father was watching, not as a fugitive, but as a ghost bound by his own mercy. As the sun broke through the haze, it painted the ashes in gold. For the first time in years, she didn't feel anger, only the quiet ache of forgiveness. Yet deep down, she knew ghosts never truly vanished. And neither did love. Time, Elena had learned, was both a healer and a thief. It dulled pain, yes, but it also stole voices, faces, entire years. 10 of them had passed since the fire on Redwood Lane, and still there were mornings when the scent of smoke lived at the edge of her memory. The hospital had changed in that time. New machines, new uniforms, younger nurses who spoke in abbreviations and optimism. But the night shifts were still the same, the hum of monitors, the whisper of rubber saws, and the faint rhythm of hearts fighting to stay alive. Elena Ward, head nurse now, moved through the ward with a quiet precision of habit. Her hair was streaked with silver, her movements slower, but her voice carried authority softened by warmth. Patients trusted her instantly. Perhaps it was because she'd once learned how fragile trust really was. That evening, as rain tapped gently against the tall windows, a young intern approached her desk. He looked nervous, clipboard clutched tight to his chest. "Ms. Ward," he said, "there's a new patient in room 304. No ID, admitted under an alias. He asked for you by name." Elena frowned. "By name?" "Yes, ma'am. Said to tell you it was Mr. Michael." The words struck her like a pulse beneath the skin. Mr. Michael. For a moment she couldn't move. The world around her narrowed to the steady beeping of the monitors and the rain whispering against glass. "You sure that's what he said?" she asked. The intern nodded. "Exactly that." She dismissed him with a nod and rose slowly, her hands trembling despite herself. Her steps echoed down the hall, each one heavier than the last. As she neared room 304, she caught the faint sound of labored breathing from inside, accompanied by a familiar, fragile cough. The door was slightly ajar. She paused outside, one hand resting against the frame, gathering courage she didn't know she still had. Inside, the light was dim, only the soft glow of the heart monitor painting the walls green. The figure on the bed was thin, aged beyond years, his face half hidden by the oxygen mask. But when he turned his head toward the door, the eyes that met hers were unmistakable. Michael Vance. Her father. His lips moved, barely forming sound, but the voice, cracked, paper-thin, carried across the sterile air. "You look," he whispered, "just like your mother." Elena's breath caught. She wanted to rush to him, to demand the truth one last time, to say all the words she had stored in silence for a decade. But something stopped her. Maybe mercy. Maybe time. She stepped closer, watching his chest rise and fall, the monitor tracing the fragile rhythm of a man who had run from life itself. His eyes flickered toward the window, where the rain had turned to morning light. When she reached for his hand, it was warm but fading. "Dad!" she said softly. You can rest now. The monitor beeped once, steady, then flat. Elena didn't cry. She simply stood there, her reflection merging with his in the glass. Two faces, one past, one present, finally at peace. Outside, the city awakened, the rain giving way to light. And somewhere between the heartbeat and the silence, forgiveness found its place.